28 days of this war, Russia continues to attack all key cities in Ukraine with no respite. Marinka, Kharkiv, Mariupol and Kyiv continue to face destruction in neighborhood after neighborhood with multiple missile attacks. Not willing to succumb to Russia's ultimatums, the Ukrainian president continues to urge for peace and comprehensive dialogue. Watch this report. A month into this war, Ukraine is definitely bruised and bleeding. Damage and devastation on the streets of Ukrainian cities as the war enters its 28th day. In the Marinka town of the Donetsk region in the east, the scenes are of devastation and destruction. Charred houses, buildings reduced to rubble, another city flattened, piles of rubble everywhere. The second largest city of Ukraine, Kharkiv, continues to witness intense and daily Russian shelling. Residential and commercial buildings of the city in many neighborhoods are piles of ruin. In the besieged eastern port city of Mariupol, Russian troops can be seen launching an all-out attack with military tanks rolling on the streets of the city. Ukrainian President Zelensky has warned that the current humanitarian catastrophe is spiraling and unfolding in the port city. Chilling images of intensifying Russian attacks. Russian troops launched cruise missiles from Sevastopol area of Crimea under their occupation. In the northern city of Chernihiv, Russian troops bombed a bridge that connects with the capital Kyiv just to the south. The bridge was being used for humanitarian aid and evacuation of civilians. Putin's army shelled multiple buildings in Kyiv's Obolon. Loud explosions were heard in the eastern part of the city. Reports suggest that over 30 rockets were fired in this particular Russian offensive. But Ukraine continues to fight back. In a big win, Ukrainian troops were able to regain control over the strategically important suburb of the capital, dealing an important blow to Russian forces. The Ukrainian government released a video of Russian forces detained in Kyiv with their weapons. Despite Russia's ultimatums and even a nuclear threat, Ukrainian President Zelensky has sought dialogue. And a question that a lot of observers, military and otherwise, have been asking over the last few days is, has Russia gotten bogged down? It's been, the fifth week of this war has begun. Kyiv, of course, is bleeding. Ukraine is bleeding. But Russia's military and air power is 5 times bigger than Ukraine's. Technically, Ukraine should have been completely dominated and defeated in a matter of days. How did things go so badly wrong for Russia? How did Putin miscalculate what was required to meet his objectives? What went wrong for the Russian war machine, and what are, importantly, Putin's options now, a full month into this war? Watch this report. Simply put, it's an epic David versus Goliath story. Russia outranks Ukraine in active military personnel strength 5-1. Moscow has 6 times more combat jets than Kyiv. Putin's defense budget is 10 times that of Zelensky's. Technically, Ukraine should have been defeated in a matter of days. But in a real war theater, that's not the case. There are many variables and many dynamics. And the war here has been very, very different. Bruised, battered and besieged Kyiv is still fighting and giving a bloody nose to Putin's war machine and his fabled army. 4 weeks and counting, but Russia has been unable to use its military and air power to the fullest. So what exactly afflicts the Russian president's war? Sample this. A full frontal infantry assault by Russia would result in far bigger numbers of fatalities. Cities cannot simply be won by punishing firepower. Capturing them demands closing in and creating footholds at the periphery and eventually getting inside. But given Ukraine's resilience, that will mean countless casualties. Does Moscow have the stomach for that? Since Russia began the invasion, there has been no major physical combat to capture territory. Russian tanks and other specialized war vehicles have been stalled at many war fronts, often suffering heavy damage. Powerful Russian armor has fallen prey to next-generation light anti-tank weapons supplied by the West and NATO. The Javelin anti-tank missiles and Bayraktar drones from Turkey have proven nemesis to the Russian army, which has failed to root out pockets of resistance. Russia's famed air force and attack helicopters are often seen struggling against ragtag Ukrainian air force and determined fighters armed with shoulder-fired missiles supplied by the West. Russia almost being seen as reluctant to deploy its manpower to the fullest to capture Ukraine's capital Kyiv, dragging the war into an endless, grinding bombing mission. Putin also didn't bargain for the body bags of Russian soldiers. Since his country has witnessed the biggest drop in population since World War II, owing to a falling fertility rate in Russia, which translates into losing close to 10 lakh people alone in the year-long period between October 2020 and September 2021. The declining birth rates can potentially reduce Russia's 14.5 crore population to 13.6 crores by 2040. Russia has also failed miserably to read asymmetric warfare on the ground in Ukraine. It aimed to finish the invasion in 3 days flat, but Putin's tanks ran dry in just 72 hours into the invasion with a lack of refills, maintenance, and a crippled logistics supply. The struggling Russian war machine moves with a month into this invasion. The struggles on the ground for Russia could prove disastrous, not just in Ukraine, but overall for Putin. Bureau Report, India Today. And joining me live from Kyiv, Ukraine today is Yevheniia Kravchux. She's a member of parliament from Ukraine. Yevheniia, thank you very much for speaking to India today. It's been nearly a month now of this operation. Hello. There is a sense, Yevheniia, that the Russian army, the Russian military has got bogged down in Ukraine. It has not met any of its objectives, and under pressure, Putin might escalate things even further right now. What is your sense?
Well, first of all, I would like to say this is not an operation. The language is very important because this is full-scale war of aggression. We did not declare this war. We didn't ask Russians to come into Ukraine. They just started at 5 a.m. in the morning, bombing Ukrainian cities on the 24th of February, and we'll already have almost months of this bloody terrorist war. Why terrorists? Because Russians are not fighting with the army. They are fighting with the whole nation and with the civilians. Also, we see that in those regions where they gained control for some time, for example, in Kyiv region, it's just 30 or 40 kilometers from Kyiv, when they were in these small villages, we have recorded, and our prosecutor war crimes and also to women. Russians would go into the houses, kill husbands, and then rape women on the eyes of a small child. So this is no operation. This is war with war crimes every day in many regions.
Yevheniia, do you think, I accept your point, from the Ukrainian perspective, that this is not a conflict, this is a full-scale war, it's an invasion that's taking place. Do you believe, from your perspective in Kyiv, Yevheniia, do you believe that things are going to escalate now? The reason I ask is because it's been a whole month. it doesn't look like Russia has been able to achieve its political or military objectives yet in Ukraine. That puts pressure on the Kremlin and President Vladimir Putin. Do you think that's bad news as far as Ukraine is concerned, or do you think that they're looking for some kind of compromise to actually end the conflict? Okay, we've lost that, very unfortunately lost that connection with Yevheniia Kravchuk. She's a prominent member of parliament from Ukraine. I'm going to try and patch her back because I want her to answer that question. What is that view from inside Ukraine? Are they expecting things to escalate, or do they believe they've given the Russians enough of a bloody nose, enough of food for thought to actually try and dial down the military operations in that area? Because image after image coming in from Ukraine suggests that things are not actually calming down. Now, what was expected to be a blitzkrieg war that Russia could dominate Ukraine within the first 3 days of this conflict have been completely debunked. It's a whole month since this conflict started, and those objectives have not been reached so far. Let's show you some graphics now, which tell you about why Russia is so bogged down in this entire conflict and why Ukraine appears, at least for the moment, to have the upper hand. Let's just give you a sense of, what it's looking like. Russia definitely has miscalculated the initial blitz. Ukraine, on the other hand, has had a very optimal deployment of its defenses, and that's why it's been able to, give Russia serious pause. Russia has been bogged down because it has completely botched its logistics for all its, tank and armored vehicle convoys that were especially around Kyiv. Whereas on the Ukrainian side, they've been able to take advantage of this logistical nightmare to unleash anti-tank fury on those Russian convoys. If you look at the Russian side, decoding number 3, why Russia is bogged down, they've been concentrating their attacks with missiles and shells and rockets from a distance, not actually going in there. So they have very little actual ground presence, in those cities. They're attacking the cities from the outside, but they don't have boots on the ground to actually take over those territories and dominate them. So for the Ukrainian side, the cities are damaged, but they haven't fallen to Russian hands, at least not all of the cities. Russia is bogged down because it's causing damage but unable to dominate those cities. It's not able to take control of Kyiv or Mariupol or any of those places because it's attacking them, but it doesn't have the ground strength to take over and dominate. Ukraine says, well, it has been very well prepared for the Russian ground attacks because it has that presence on the ground and it has preempted this. It has no option but to, see the damage taking place, but it is able to still control all of those cities. Joining me live now is Lieutenant General Syed Ata Hasnain, former General Officer commanding of the Indian Army's 15 Corps in the Kashmir Valley. He's written a column that everyone's been reading about why the Russians have been bogged down. General Hasnain, always really a privilege to have you on our coverage of the Ukraine war. Day 28, General, my first question, why do you think the Russians have got so bogged down?
Thank you, Shiv. Thank you for having me on your show. As for the reasons for the Russians not being able to make much headway, I think it all starts from the first 5 days of the war, where they probably did not imagine the kind of response that would come their way. And they decided to use limited options, limited coercion, and when that didn't work, then they went into an overdrive. Now, while going on to the overdrive also, it seems that they stuck to the old patterns, the 1956 walk-in operations into Hungary, 68, the walk-in operations into Prague, Czechoslovakia. They stuck to the roads and tracks. They did not want to leave them. It seems that they were not ready to really use maneuver either of the mechanized forces or of the infantry. Now, for the infantry, it is understandable because Russia is a country, is a nation, clearly a huge nation with a small population, 145 million today. And as for the demographics of the day today, there is a dwindling population. It's going to come down to 135, 136 million in the next couple of years. in a situation such as that, when you have very little young people with you, the tendency is to guard and protect the youth and not employ them as virtual cannon fodder, as many countries are wont to do. This is what the Russians are very careful about. And therefore, they are only willing to use shock and awe, cruise missiles, maybe rocketry and guns against the cities, against the objectives. But these objectives cannot be attained unless you put the boots on ground. That, as an infantryman myself, I can tell you, until the infantry closes in with the adversary, takes him out and occupies the ground, you cannot be assured of any victory. Now that's the problem with the Russians at the moment. They're pounding the cities to smithereens, but at the same time they are unable to get into it, primarily because the Ukrainians are holding the peripheries with smart anti-tank teams of 2 to 3 men, smart anti-aircraft shoulder-fired Stinger missiles, which are not allowing the attack helicopters to either close in. Now, if this continues, obviously you're going to find a lot of destruction, but the Russians unable to probably capture their objectives.
Okay, stay with me, General Hasnain. Yevheniia Kravchux, who's a Ukrainian MP, is also continuing to be with me. Yevheniia, sorry we lost you for a moment, but I'm glad you're back with us.
Yes, I'm sorry we have a bad internet
I
connection
understand.
lately,
I understand.
but
That's not a problem at all.
from my phone now.
I don't know if you could hear the last person who was speaking.
Yes, I could hear.
Yeah,
I could hear, and I have a.
I want you to add to that. I want you to add to that because he's written a column in a newspaper today about how the Russian army has met its match. It has completely been bogged down. It has miscalculated. It has underestimated. It has made many wrong decisions in this entire 1 month and is basically kind of stuck in Ukraine right now. What would you like to add to that, Yevhen?
Yes, I would like to add that first, of course, the high morale and high motivation of Ukrainian army actually stopped this on-ground operation, and Russians didn't gain Kiev, didn't gain any big cities, and they were really surprised because soldiers that we captured, they say that, well, we were told by our commanders that we're going, like on a trip we'll be in Kiev in 3 days. And they did not expect that the whole nation will fight so fiercely, because even in those territories where they did go on the ground and sort of, occupied, people would go on manifestations and go into these tanks with bare hands, not letting them go further. I don't think that Russians expected that. Moreover, I think that the whole command of Russia, together with Putin, they all believed themselves in this propaganda what is on Russian channels, that Ukrainians would greet them with flowers, that the army is weak, but what they got was very surprising. And well, it's not surprising for us. Also, another thing, and I think that it will have an impact on the top of generals and in the army. Because of corruption, I think a lot of money that was spent on ammunition, on the army, was just stolen by Russian commands and wherever on the chain, on this food chain. So basically, they overestimated what they can do on the ground. That's true.
Interesting.
But still, the number of forces, are exceeding, of course, than what we have in Ukraine. But we have a lot of reservists, and we have people even coming into country from other countries to join army, to join defense units, and to go and fight for our freedom and fight for our state. And of course, what they do, they are just bombing the civilians and bombing cities. And we need an air defense to take off these rockets that are going from, the Black Sea, the long lands missiles that are flying to Ukrainian
and that's just the point. The point is, Yevheniia, you make an excellent point. You're saying that even with the limited resources, the less resources than the Russian military machine, the Ukrainians have been able to, not just give Russia a bloody nose, but give them a lot of pause. that's the reason why this has stretched on for, an entire month. I want you to listen now, Yevheniia, to what General Hasnain has to say. He was a general in the Indian Army. He commanded one of the most important formations of the Indian Army in the Kashmir Valley, which I'm sure you've heard of. General Hasnain,
yes,
what is your assessment, sir?
The Kashmir war.
Yes, absolutely. What is your assessment, General Hasnain, of how the Ukrainian military has fought back against all odds?
See, Shiv, I am mindful of the fact that whatever I have written and whatever I am going to speak is also based upon a lot of information which is coming out from the Ukrainian side, managed very slickly by NATO. It's not biasing me as such, but I do think the Ukrainians, with a lot of advice from NATO and a lot of advice from contractors, well-experienced military men from the United States who have been there perhaps for a couple of years, have realized that the Russians is a superior force. They are unlikely to be able to commit enough infantry to these kind of operations. So what they've done is they have held the built-up areas at the peripheries with high density of anti-tank teams, lots of anti-aircraft missiles, shoulder-fired missiles, and are not allowing the Russian armed forces to make an entry, a foothold. A foothold into the built-up area is essential. Only then can it start. Secondly,
very true,
they have been making a lot of use of electronic intelligence. Now, the killing of reported killing of 6 Russian generals, for example, can be completely, it can be completely stated to be because of the kind of electronic intelligence gained from the radars, from the other electronic activity, which usually emanates from a headquarters. And that's the reason why those headquarters have probably been plastered subsequently by a lot of explosive means, and that's how the Russian generals have been taken out. Similarly, logistics. Everyone knows that armies run on logistics. They have to march on their stomachs. So the Ukrainians have been smart. I'm not sure whether it is special forces, but some elements of the Ukrainian army definitely have penetrated behind, have targeted Russian logistics columns, as a result of which the columns have generally run dry. And although the Russians also faulted by not perhaps catering for something more than just 72 hours of supplies, which is what they came with. So with all this kind of advice, I think this has been a fair reading of the adversary by the Ukrainians. And that's the reason why they have employed some unconventional ways, which we in the Indian Army, I can assure you, are well aware of. This is exactly what is the kind of thing that we would like to employ. But the Ukrainians have demonstrated it on the ground and, of course, performed creditably.
So Yevheniia, you've just heard one of the top Indian Army generals, providing a very, very positive assessment of the way the Ukrainian military has fought back so far. My one final question to you, Yevheniia, is that it's been 1 month now. Russia is a big country. It is a superpower. Yes, the Ukrainian defense has been very good. It's been very strong. But do you sense in Ukraine, in Kyiv right now, do you sense that under pressure, do you think Russia will try to escalate and intensify this invasion and this military operation in your country?
Well, first of all, I would like to say, yes, we are heroes for all the world, but we do not want to be, all the heroes to be dead. So actually, we do need some more support from the world in weapons, in all kind of humanitarian aid. And of course, I think that it's no time to be neutral. That's why I would like to address the Indian nation. You are, seventh economy in the world and second country in population in the world. It's no time to be neutral. I know that a lot of Indian people have studied in Ukraine or know who were students in Ukraine. I'm sorry, yes, and you do have casualties in this war of aggression as well, because this poor student in Kharkiv was killed by Russian bombs. So that's second. It's no time to be neutral. You need to take sides, because this is, this is real, and this is going for over a month. we are ready to, to stay more, and there are some signals, clear signals, that Russians will make another attempt to go to Kiev and to try to gain Kiev. But every time they try to move forward, they have a clear response from our artillery, from the drones. So the Kiev looks like a fortress right now, but it's very symbolical for Putin. I think that he wants to, to put a parade in Ukrainian capital, but he will break his teeth on it. But still, we need more support to stay more and win in this war. By the way, by sociology, 95% of Ukrainians believe we will win in this war.
Yevheniia Kravchuk, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. Also, thank you to General Ata Hasnain for being with me on this story. Day 28, it's going to be 1 month very soon. What does Russia have to show for it, apart from being able to control some of the southern and eastern parts of Ukraine? Untold devastation in different cities, but those objectives, the actual political objectives so far, have not been met. This is war. It's a terrible, dirty business, and things could go and get much, much worse in the days ahead.